Well, Jonathan said, would you fancy coming to lend? So I go and work at Ruffler Bank in Epsom, and I was lending to showmen, travellers, the coin-op business. Think of the amphibious vehicle that went around London. And it taught me a lot about measuring people. I think you said to me when we met the other week, oh, you must be comfortable. I'm never comfortable. You get out of bed, there's things to do. You know, am I going to play golf? No. Am I going to sunbathe? No. Maybe they don't want to deal with more problematic cases, whereas I enjoy that. You know, at the end of the day, I'd love a vanilla deal every day of the week where it's, 65% loan to GDV or 70% LTV on a bridging loan, and vanilla client, 100%, 999 out of 1,000 credit. Well, they've already been serviced by some of the bigger packages. So, crumbs off the table works for me.
Today in the studio, we have Phil Mabb at Bridge Development. Phil has won a number of awards in his time, including Moneyfacts Bridging Finance Introducer of the Year, Sole Trader of the Year at the Commercial Broker Awards, and Property Finance Broker of the Year at the London and South East England Prestige Awards, to name but a few. He's a father, husband, long-suffering Crystal Palace fan, and would you believe it, a 1994 supermarket sweep winner. Welcome, Phil. So,
delighted to be invited.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. All right, so you were saying something I didn't realise, and this is a great place to start. You spent 7 months together. How did that come about?
My uncle Chris was one of Henry Moser's best mates, and I worked for a AIM-listed firm called Davenham, which was based in Manchester. And I said to my uncle Chris, "They get me an audience with with Henry." And this was when he was at Bracken House, but he always had a broken lift. And I remember going up to the top floor, and it's you get to his power room, and there's this guy who's relatively short, quite well built, with the meanest braces, always wears a white shirt with a bit of ketchup on. And I asked him to give me 100 million to kick off a bridging lender. Well, this was bang in the middle of 8, 9, 10. Sorry, Phil, not right now. But my uncle died, and Henry was at the church smoking a cigar, as he's famous for. And he said, "Oh, Philip, I'm coming to London, you're in." He had just raised about 200 million on the bond market. And I'd just finished winding down Taut-a. What we had was in the shop windows, effectively. So my job was redundant. So I worked for him for 7 months. Worked under Chris Bagley in the London office, Lombard Street, which was where Lendinvest started. Same building, same floor, just not the same room. Anyway, I did 7 months, and it didn't quite work for us.
Wasn't the ideal marriage, shall we say?
No, but you've got to give it a go. I'd worked for Manchester-based firms where I walked into the office and I was introduced, and someone said, "Oh, Phil, I'm related to you, and I'm working with your uncle," and all this sort of stuff. So I've got that northern relationship, which it kind of serves me well.
Well, that's amazing, because we've known each other for almost the entire length of Avamore's existence, and
I've known your colleagues here
even
a little
longer.
bit before.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So. It's nice to see you in bright colours, the bright colours that you're always known for. Anyone who sees Phil at MIPIM, they need sunglasses, not only for the sunshine, but also for Phil's attire as well. Obviously, your colour matches we were just mentioning in your formal intro that you were a winner on Supermarket Sweep in 1994. So the colour obviously matches Dale Winton's.
Am I going to regret that? Yeah, my local gym had this thing. Would you like to go into a competition? And I said to my wife, "Do you fancy it?" Just for a bit of fun. We didn't know anything about it. I actually lived with a Canadian girl, shared a house. And she already knew about it because it emanated out of America. And she said, "Give it a go." So I went for a screen test, I think they called it, with Sue. And Sue was a friend of mine from, when she was knee-high to a grasshopper, and a ballerina. So she had good stage presence. We passed the screen test. Next thing, we're up to Nottingham. And, well, guess what? I won. £2,000 and my train fare home.
Well, that's what a great story. How old were you at the time?
94, work that one out. Early mid-20s.
Mid-20s, yeah.
Mid-20s.
Okay, well, £2,000 in 90s, in your early 20s, that's early mid-20s. That goes quite a long way. That was the best part of a car, wasn't it, back then? Maybe not the cars you were wanting to drive.
Motorbike, yeah.
A motorbike, that's true.
Apparently, there's a guy called Ryan who reran Supermarket Sweep more recently, and the price is still only £2,000.
It's still only £2,000?
It was proper money then. I had to share it, mind.
Yeah, that's true. Doesn't go quite as far.
15 minutes of fame. And I might tell you quietly, it's on YouTube.
Yeah. You were saying also that there's another, and maybe our audience can help find you as well. There's another recording of you. You feature also on TV around that time.
94 Estoril Grand Prix.
Estoril Grand Prix.
I worked for the Carphone Warehouse at the time, and we were the prize winners selling Cellnet's services. Were invited to go to the Grand Prix. It was a proper junket. We were staying in the same hotels as the motor racing drivers. They even had a wet T-shirt competition. I'm not sure how.
I'm not sure that would go down very well these days.
Well, exactly. And I was above Damon Hill and Coulthard.
They were the top team that at the time, weren't they?
They were. Brenner Williams. It was great. Anyway, one of our drivers won, and our box was sat literally next door to the podium where they present. And my father said he saw me on TV because they panned slightly to the left. They're shaking the champagne up, and they went, "It's me." So yeah. I also was in the Carphone Warehouse TV ad in '94.
Oh,
until I left, and where I left was going to work with someone that Charles Dunson didn't like, so they cut me out. Impartial advice is what I said, and that was filmed in the Moorgate office, the Carphone Warehouse, which sadly no longer exists.
Well, for any of our audience, any of our viewers who want to. Shall we say, who want to find Phil?
Help me.
Help him out, yeah.
And DM me or PM me or whatever on whatever forum you can, and because I'd like to find it.
All right. Well, we'll make it a mission for all of our guests. I interviewed Steve Burns last week, obviously now at Word on the Street, and obviously if you don't know who Steve Burns is, and you're in
Burnsy,
unless you're not in specialist
I think
finance.
He's a Berry boy as well.
He is a Berry boy, yeah. And anyway, so him and Mark McBriar both featured on a TV series called Viewing Recommended, and after I interviewed Steve on Friday, I went on a personal mission on YouTube to try and find him, and unfortunately I haven't been able to find him. So again, he did tell me that he's got full recordings that he can share, because I'm absolutely, because by the sounds of it, it's really cheesy and really sort of really naff. And
that's not Mr. Burns, is it?
So I'm really keen to get to have a look at that. So you're talking about Carphone Warehouse. So I thought it'd probably a good idea to if you can. Obviously, for you to sort of talk through your career journey, so that there's no better time like that. So you're in your mid-20s, you're working at Carphone Warehouse. How did you end up at Carphone Warehouse? How did you? Obviously, it'd be interesting to see how you went from Carphone Warehouse and mobile telephones to the specialist finance industry. But what was university like, or did you go to university, and how did you end up in Carphone?
Let's go back a little bit.
Okay,
I was not particularly academic, and I would put that down to being kind of slightly lazy. So I went to a public school, came out with a few O-levels, did some retakes, came out with some more. Anyway, I started working in the late 80s for a merchant bank called Hill Sandwich. Started as a temp and then became a perm, and I stuck there for a few years until they made me redundant. And they made it really, nobody wants to stay. And I had a little job to do, which I finished, and they said, "Phil, stay." But then the redundancy payment was quite low, and I owed quite a lot of money, spending it, living out, trying to keep up with my friends, the Joneses sort of thing. So I went to work for an actuarial firm called Frank Russell and did that for a few years. But the Carphone Warehouse thing came much, much later. There's a guy called Simon Jordan. Mm-hmm. It was part of my youth.
Simon Jordan, who's also quite well known for having a connection with Crystal Palace, which is obviously your football team.
Well, we did stand on the terrace together. His old man used to live down the road, so it was good because I could go to his house, watch TV, go to the game, come back, watch TV before, let the crowds disperse. In fact, Simon Jordan was in my flat in Battersea back in 1990 when we got to the Cup final. We were too lazy to go and queue to get tickets, so we had to watch it on TV like everybody else, and we watched the 3-3 and then the 1-0, and it was good. But we did go to, I'm trying to think what the game was called, the Tin Pot Cup, where we beat Everton 4-1 or 4-2.
So, the Tin Pot Cup. Is that the official title?
I don't think it was called ZDS at the time. It was one of those.
Zenith Data Systems Club.
Yeah. Well, it's something, So we went to Wembley. We did win something. And he went on to a successful career building that business, which he sold and used some of the money to buy Selhurst Park.
Well, there you go.
But unfortunately, I suspect he wasn't wealthy enough to sustain it because, it's a billionaire's playground now.
It certainly is, yeah.
And if you're not a billionaire, you need to team up with some other people. But he owned it for 10 years, I think, until he didn't pay his bills. And someone said, we'll have that back now.
Yeah.
So you got the parish mob. And, I think I was a fan of Palace from the 70s, late 70s. And look at us now, 13 years in the Premiership. How good is that? All the London derbies, we're not doing particularly well right now, but I live in hope.
As a long-suffering Arsenal fan, or perhaps a bit less suffering than a Palace fan, yeah, I certainly...
Well, your expectations are up there, ours are here. And when we get a scalp like yours, and we do occasionally...
You do occasionally.
It's much a greater feeling. It's like winning the cup every game. Whereas Arsenal, well, you expect to win. So, you don't know what hurt really is.
No. Yeah, no, we haven't experienced relegation, that's for sure. Going back to your career trajectory, so you were working with Simon and then what came next?
I did. I worked in telecoms for a while because it was quite in a sexy environment. They paid well. And I was playing cricket with a guy who works at UTB. He's one of the senior directors there. And he worked for a little bank in Epsom called Ruffler Bank. And he used to open. He's 6'5", so he'd just swing his arm, and that was a bouncer. And most people were like, duck or get out of the way. I was more line and length, and if you didn't hit the ball, it would hit the wicket.
Yeah,
that was a routine, and it worked. We were playing for a company called the Weekenders. It was a thespian cricket team set up by a guy called Clive Swift. And if you don't know who he is, think of the actor in Keeping Up Appearances with Hyacinth Bouquet. Mm-hmm. He was the henpecked husband.
Yeah.
Charming chap. He set up this thing in the 70s for his...
That was Clive Swift. That was literally Clive Swift.
Yeah. And we used to go up to Totteridge and Whetstone and play for our home games. Really, we'd travel all over the UK as long as there was daylight, and the teas were the best bit. And some of the people we played with were actors. There was a guy, Mike Reed, I think he was called. He was Captain Birdseye. I mean, they're not famous actors because they had time to play cricket.
Yeah,
they had lots of time to lose between jobs, which might be every couple of years. So Jonathan and I were ringers, as were a few of the other players. All lived in Wandsworth, but ended up travelling all the way to Totteridge and Whetstone for our home games, or further afield for the aways. It was good. I liked it, and it was something to do, as you do in your 20s.
And then how did that translate to sort of the career progression then?
Well, Jonathan said, would you fancy coming to lend? Now, bear in mind, I've been in business-to-business sales or business-to-consumer, and lending money is not about putting it out, it's getting it back in. What did I know? So I go and work at Ruffler Bank in Epsom, and I was lending to showmen, travellers, the coin-op business. Think of the amphibious vehicle that went around London, and...
Oh, the duck tours.
The ducks, that we funded those. And it taught me a lot about measuring people because, my wife's a great judge of character. And she'll tell you the first thing she said when she met Simon Jordan was something pretty unpleasant, as did my two sisters as well. But you've got to actually judge a character, and dealing with people, particularly the showman's fraternity, they're a world apart from what I was. And if I learned anything when I was at Ruffler Bank, it was a better measure of people. And also I learned a bit about lending property. And after 6 years there, I got tapped up by a broker called Keith he's a Berry boy as well. And Ruffler Bank never took commissions from brokers or introductions.
It wasn't Keith Foster, was it?
It was. Good old Keith.
I know Keith, yeah.
Well, Keith introduced me to the head of property at Davenham. They just floated. They were talking about creating a London office. So on a wet Tuesday night, I was up at Euston Station meeting Gary Ellis. And guess what? The next job, I was meeting what was my line manager then, Martin Risman. He looked after trade and asset. I looked after the property in London at the Savoy. And then I went up for about 9 interviews at the head office in Manchester, and they gave me a job. And actually, that was probably the pinnacle of my career because it was an AIM-listed firm. Our office was its own profit and loss centre. And it exploded. It was the good days when the trajectory was like that. And I was lending money at 85% loan to GDV.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? But there's stamp duty was pretty much 4% across the board. Buy-to-let exits were at 85, 90. So there was this sort of... and I remember lending money where people literally didn't put anything more than stamp duty, legals and a QS report.
Amazing.
Absolutely stunning. until it all fell over.
Until it all fell over.
And then it fell over, and it properly fell over.
So what sort of time horizon are we talking about here? When did you?
2006 to 2010.
Yeah.
So I was lending. Then it.
So you were like 2000, 2006. You were at Ruffler, and then 2006, 2010. You were at Davenham.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it was good. Davenham would have been the Aldermore. And funnily enough, Ruffler Bank's banking license, when Roy wanted to sell up, that became the Aldermore banking license. And, you've seen how that Challenger Bank has grown and grown and grown. So it was one of my opportunities to be a millionaire. Well, it's not happened. And am I crying about it? No, it keeps me motivated. I think you said to me when we met the other week, oh, you must be comfortable. I'm never comfortable. You get out of bed, there's things to do. Am I going to play golf? No. Am I going to sunbathe? No. When we had a house in France, the wife would go there for several months. I was happy to work. I'd pop in and see her just to sort of keep the peace. But there's people need looking after. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at is when I got to about 32 and I was lending purely on property, I found my vocation. I do what I like, when I like, with who I like. So what's not to like about that? And it works for me because it's not a job. It's a solution. Give me a problem and I'll try and, I remember years ago, I had a boss at Ruffler Bank, Frank Russell. And he said to me, Phil, you always come in looking to take something and put it in a box and tie the bow. And I said, that's right. I'll take that. And that sort of stuck in my mind. Get a problem, fix it. Good, bad, or ugly, indifferent. And if you can help somebody, so if you've got any problems, talk to me later with your colleagues.
And see what you can do.
Yeah, so go. I know I lose track or I go off on sort of.
I think it's called a weave.
A weave. I'm not dodging the question, but so Davenham. Then I spent a few years winding Taut-a because I'd done quite a lot of winding down at Davenham, fixing problems, taking situations, making them good, because that's what was the right thing to do, was to fund schemes to a finish, because you get more pennies in the pound. And when you got shareholders, and we were sponsored by 10 banks, they were happy to do that as long as there was a chance of getting more back than just selling it as it was, and you'll get that. A friend of mine, one of the guys I laid off, he was part of our team, a guy called John Jury. He rang me up and said, "Oh, look, Phil, bearing in mind what you've done, how do you fancy coming to wind down this company called Taut-a?" And I hadn't heard of them.
So this is why you're still at Davenham at this point?
I'd almost finished. I was almost finished up.
So just for the benefit of those of us who came into the specialist finance market a bit like, 5, 6, 7 years after the financial crisis as we did, presumably Davenham's business model just wasn't sustainable because they lent essentially too much money against a load of developments that ended up.
Well, you imagine you do 85% loan to GDV and the market drops 25. It doesn't matter if you do a penny out, you're underwater.
You're underwater.
Absolutely underwater.
So that was it. Just blew up, basically.
Blew up. For those that were left, we were retained to wind the company down. And I left on the 21st of December in 2010. In fact, I'd just forgotten. I had a job in between. I went to work with my mate Martin Risman, and we went to COFAS, the global credit insurer.
Oh, yeah.
He said, "Phil, I know what you like. You don't need to know the product set." So I moved to COFAS. So I literally 21st, started on the Monday, took a week or two off, and then, on the coalface, selling invoice discounting, quite big ticket stuff. February, we all get called in. I was at an RSM conference, and we all get called back to the office. "Oh, we're selling the book, so you're going to be out of a job." And I'm thinking, well, I got paid out quite well on that one. Am I going to get paid out well on this one? Well, the wife benefited from a brand new car, an Audi. So, we didn't do too badly.
Wasn't too bad.
No, so I almost forgot that. COFAS for about a year. And that's where my mate John Jury ran and said, Taut-a, we're taking the books and we're going to wind it down. So I did some ugly stuff.
So can you tell people, again, Taut-a has a, for some of the more experienced people in the industry, they obviously know the full story behind Taut-a.
You mean older?
But again,
say it as it is.
Well, no, I mean, look, I wouldn't classify myself as particularly young myself anyway, but because we came into the industry 4 or 5 years after, we didn't have the benefit of the history. We just we just hear the name Taut-a and we know it was a bit of a shit show.
Do you know what the acronym means?
You did tell me this over lunch, but but you got to say it again.
Take it up the... and I leave you to make your own mind up. There's all sorts of rumours whether that was a true acronym by the people who set it up. I don't know. Maybe it was.
Yeah.
But for an organisation that came from nowhere, in my mind, it exploded. I remember going to the equivalent of the FP show or MBO show at that period of time. They had the front stand. They had Big Rob Jupp was working for them. I mean, you can't miss him.
No, you certainly can't miss Rob, no.
And they were prolific, writing lots of business because most people weren't. And then, it all
So when was their sort of heyday? Was it
9, 10?
So during the GFC, basically.
Yeah.
And where were they getting the funding from? How, I thought that would have been very hard to fund.
This is where I sort of come into it. There was a company called Connaught Asset Management that worked with financial advisors, raising capital, offering double-digit returns, but they were using low risk. Now, you and I now know that there's no such thing as low risk.
So they mislabeled it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, that
missold. It was missold.
Missold. Really, the real crux of the matter is what went on within Connaught and Taut-a itself. I'm sure there's a gagging order, so I'm going to be a little bit restricted on what I say, but it wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't what it should have been. And when I got there, I went to work for Connaught. We'd bought the two books. One was unregulated, one was regulated. Regulated was actually quite a good book. In fact, Fred Sarto, who was at, I forget now which firm, he actually made a profit out of that. The unregulated book, well, it was dead in the water. And, first thing I did was have a look at the files and go, refinancing, bridging a bridge was not the right thing to do then. It's not necessarily the right thing to do now. But it was pretty ugly. And I think it was dead in the water before it started. It didn't have any legs, but it continued. And you might have read in January this year, 2 people got found guilty to the tune of 20 million. Now, that wasn't a Crown prosecution. That was
a private prosecution.
Private prosecution. What happens next, I have no idea. But that's 2024. I was there.
That's how long it took. That's how long it's taken.
12 years.
Yeah.
And, well, where's the money? Frittered somewhere. They had a swanky office. Apparently the company cars were pretty executive for a lowly BDM.
So there's a lot of, basically a lot of jiggery pokery and money. A lot of money went into, shall we say, the ether.
It went sideways.
Yeah.
Right. In the drains.
In the drains, yeah.
The drains.
Okay.
But that was another good experience to sort of have a look on the other side, back into a lender, but how not to lend and how you got to be careful what you do and how you do it. And an oversight function, I think you need to have more than one. So I do something, you watch, but someone else is watching you, watching me, because then you might find out what goes on. And, I don't think there's any whistleblows there. So I don't really know how it came about.
How big of an organisation, like in terms of headcount? Like presumably, there can't have been too many people in the firm generally. No. No,
I think they're 20, 30 at its peak, because they had in-house lawyers, they had a good sales team, people that are still in the company in our sector now, because they didn't do anything wrong.
No,
it was the management.
Yeah.
Having
in-house lawyers, I guess again, you can kind of. You mark your own homework, can't you? From a credit perspective, see no evil, hear no evil, right?
White collar crime does pay,
or
it did. But I look at that and just go, that was a great opportunity to learn things and look on the other side, and dealing with administrators. When I was at Davenham, we wound the company down using the support of a company called MCR. MCR became Duff and Phelps. Duff and Phelps is now Kroll, but I'd had some contacts there I forgot about. So when they found me at Taut-a, they laid a lot of staff off, but they kept me because they said, Phil, you actually know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Which was no disrespect to the others, but it kept me in a job for a couple of years. And that's when, again, I put everything in the shop window. And that's when my uncle died. And that's when I rang up Henry and said, anyway.
This episode is brought to you by J3 Advisory. J3 understands the unique insurance challenges that lenders face and are committed to providing solutions that offer peace of mind and financial security. Their expert advice helps you make better, faster decisions about your insurance program. Interested in a CPD session to update your teams on the current insurance landscape, or need precise and practical insurance advice for life schemes? Get in touch with J3 Advisory. Learn more at j3advisory.co.uk. J3 Advisory is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. But before we skip on to the next phase, when we were having lunch, you were telling me about a situation where you ended up having to actually sue an administrator when you're on your way out of Taut-a. Or have I misremembered that? The history of that?
Connor eventually fell foul like everybody else. The business went bust, and said our own administrator had verbally said he would fulfill certain obligations. In my case, was 6 months' notice on the exit. We got called in one day. Well, what happened is we get to the office in Wimbledon, no keys. There's a security guard on the inside. He comes in, checks you down. Said, you can sit on that seat, but I want your password and all the rest of it. And in 5 minutes, we'll lead you out. And we all were given envelopes. And on that envelope said, this is what you're getting. And it was purely statutory. So there was 5 of us, including Nick Hilton, John Jury, and he was a guy who employed me who I'd laid off previously. So he got his own back on me. And they said, that's it. You're not getting any notice. You got your statutory, which ran into a few £100. So we made complaints, and we just made it very painful for him because he had to deal with these complaints under his brand. I think it was ICAEW. Well, guess what? It didn't create. He didn't get in any trouble, but he did get sacked and kicked out of the accountancy group for something else, because we knew he was kind of. It was all about him and not about anyone else. But
right.
So yeah. Whether we played a part in it, but of course, when you mark people's cards, I'm sure these organisations keep a list of, whether they call them a complaint. It's a bit complaint handling is now. Well, he's gone.
It might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, because you'd made a complaint. You made a complaint about him, but you weren't the only one. And all of a sudden, they're like, right, okay, we've got to have a closer look into this individual.
Yeah, well, he was a sole trader effectively. And if you work for a big organisation, yes, there's the brand, but beneath it is always the person, not a partner of whether PwC, Deloitte, or anything else. So I was glad he got his comeuppance. I didn't get another redundancy payment or a big one, but I got 2 good ones. So should I really complain? So the wife's still got a new car and I haven't. That's where.
And is that why you ride a motorbike?
That's when it's half a car, right?
Yeah.
So it was a good time. Lots of learning, lots of experience, and it kind of sets me apart from, a lot of people have not had that. And a lot of people were older than me in the previous crisis, 90s. They're out of the industry now, retired, whatever. So I see the problems today in the same way as I did then, and I actually have a solution for it. Because a lot of people I've been tapped up with, clients, come to me with problems where they historically had a good broker, but that broker doesn't know anything about, maybe they don't want to deal with more problematic cases, whereas I enjoy that. At the end of the day, I'd love a vanilla deal every day of the week where it's 65% loan to GDV or 70% LTV on a bridging loan, and vanilla client 100%, 999 out of 1,000 credit. Well, they've already been serviced by some of the bigger packages. So crumbs off the table works for me. Give me a problem, I solve it.
I think at the end of the day, as many of our specialist finance listeners and viewers know, you don't break a solid existing relationship by offering the same thing that everyone else can. You break into relationships because you offer something that someone else can't offer, or because someone's dropped the ball and made a mistake. And that's fundamentally, and in your case, you're obviously offering something that, well, you're probably doing both, right? You're fixing someone else's mistake, or you're offering something different, or something that people aren't willing to do.
Interesting observation. I do find that clients, look, it's good for the broker if they keep a client and they keep them, but sometimes you've got to ask the question, are they doing right by me? TCF, that's all I believe in. Treating customers fairly. I don't have swanky offices. I don't have high demands. So I don't necessarily need to get big fees, something sensible, something, proper recompense. But I've seen situations where people are paying more than the arrangement fee. And I'm going, why are you paying that? Because if you gave your client back some of that, you're still doing quite nicely and your client's better off. And you see that, that's the great thing. I've been an old lag, been around the block, got the grey hair. I get people tapping me up from time to time that have had a very good relationship with somebody. But I'm going, well, actually, just a minute, go with that. There's something better. Why haven't they taken you there? Because I'm not doing anything that's particularly unique. Yes, I know hundreds of lenders, but in reality, I don't use that many. It's more a case of, can I fit them in the box? Because you want reliability. Can they deliver? Will they deliver? Right now, when the sun shines, everybody can deliver money. But when it doesn't, what's on your book? What's distracting you? Are you lending? Can you lend? Is your pricing sensible? It's shifting sands, and that's what brokers do. They find they create a problem. Why am I a broker? When I was working for Frank Russell, I was earning a decent salary, 95, got my first flat with what is now my wife. I went into my local Halifax and said, this is me, this is my wife, this is what we do. And they said, yeah, there's a mortgage. I changed my jobs. They said, we can't do it. Well, guess what? My wife worked in an estate agency business. She went to a broker she knew, and he took us back to the same people. And the answer was yes. So I recognise what a broker can do, and it all comes back to doing the right job constantly. You've got to be persistent about it. I don't ever expect my clients to not look. They'll be tapped up by somebody else. You've got to be on your toes all the time, going, can you do this? Is there something better? And sometimes I'll take a deal to quite a lot of people, because when it gives me a distinct market share, and sometimes lenders change the goalposts in a positive way and negative. You think, oh, they probably won't do it, or they don't price it in a certain way, and then suddenly there's a great offering. And that allows me to go, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing whole of market, new lender, new proposition. Oh, I forgot them. I've made a mistake before by not thinking a lender would do the deal, and someone else took it to that same lender and they did the deal. I'm thinking, well, that's a loss fee for me.
You can only place a case with one lender at a time. So, and is there not a point where actually why am I sending this to 20 lenders or 8 lenders or however many you're sending out to? I mean, there's clearly a limit to the number of lenders you're going to want to send a deal to, right?
Well, you ban lenders. Banks tend to be slightly cheaper. They've got access to, but they're much more vanilla on what they want. You've got to fit in the box. It's not like a paper bag.
They're harder work. The processes are generally slower.
Absolutely. Then you've got the finance houses, and they come in the form of, I call them finance houses or family offices. I mean, to me, our business is property-based lending. It's money management. It's not stocks and shares. It's just property-based lending. End of. I love the way that things are sliced up: senior, stretch senior, super stretch senior, MES. This capital stack, and then you have the part finished things. It's just real estate lending. It's just how you price it that determines. It's a risk adjusted kind of thing. Sometimes I have to. I could take and rather than taking it to one and then say no, I will package a deal up and send it, distribute it uniquely, not here you go, 30 lenders fight it, because there's no certainty that you'll do a deal because there's quirkiness. I've got one on at the moment and I've been offered terms, but I suspect when they see the personal guarantee, they're going, it's a bit weak for that sort of money. Do we really want to do the deal? Yeah, well, fine. And I gave them a clue in my little script, but things I don't think everybody reads it. I spend a lot of time writing a paper and putting attachments. I don't expect you to read and open everything, but all the answers there if you look, because I haven't got time to write to one lender or 30 and go over this sort of backwards and forwards. I'll spell it out. So utopia would be there's 4 or 5 lenders, but my deals come in so many shapes and forms. Hindu temple a couple of years ago. Would you do a Hindu temple?
I wouldn't say that was in the middle of I would say that's in our sweet spot. No.
No, and I had no idea. So on Sunday, I popped it up on LinkedIn, and within 30 seconds, probably because someone was bored like me on LinkedIn, said, "I'll do that, Phil." And I went, "Wow, great job." And we had 3 days to complete it.
No way.
It was a shed in Thornton Heath, which was associated with a place in Wembley, and the devotees put £500,000 in 2 years ago on the premise they had 2 years to organise themselves with a bank or a charity bank to deliver. Well, guess what? It never happened. And no, should it be a surprise when they're not financial people?
So you funded a bridge on a Hindu temple in 3 days.
Yeah. I don't.
I mean,
can I tell you
literally a miracle.
It was, yeah. Manna from heaven came down. Am I allowed to tell you who it was?
Yeah, sure.
Well, there's a guy called Brian Barterby who used to be a broker to me, and he runs a commercial specialist lender called PropLend. And he said, "I'll do that." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Phil, in that audience will be someone who's wealthy who will solve this if need be, but I'll solve it now." And anyway, he ended up with Unity Trust in the end. I love those sort of deals because that's not a commercial deal. You know, what are we doing is facilitating wealth creation. That was a church where they wanted to practice in South London. That's good. That was a feel-good factor. You know, the fee was irrelevant. It was I got them solved the problem in a couple of days.
You looked after a community asset, and
I remember a guy coming to me, had £1 million problem with a certain challenger bank. They had £6 million worth of assets, and he had a revolver to his head. And they said, "In 2 weeks, your biggest asset's going in the auction rooms." Well, what I did, I talked to them. I talked to the administrator, it was a receiver, and the new lender, and I'll keep you all informed. And took the problem from A to B. He had enforcement notices. He didn't have planning on his stuff. He wasn't in control. And I put a builder in to fix those problems, a warranty provider to get the warranties, and then we took it to a term loan. Most people go, "Ooh, run scared. Oh, it's a problem." Well, that's what I enjoy. It's, everyone can do a bridging loan, let's face it. It's not difficult. Development finance, slightly different, but problem solving, it's good. You get older, the brain doesn't work quite as quickly. I love that.
Sounds like you're still solving a lot of problems. You were talking about, fees, procuration fees, and brokers even taking more of a procuration fee than the arrangement fee. We had Martin Stewart come on the podcast. I interviewed him, I guess, a couple of months ago. We're only in the process of releasing that episode shortly. He was actually advocating for the banning of proc fees and effectively clients paying brokers directly. Now, from the lender's perspective, we'll pay whatever the going rate is in the market. But what do you make of that take? And do you think that that's something that you agree with, or you actually think that actually the current system works? It's just how it's being adopted.
It's topical at the moment because, of course, you've got the motor finance thing.
Can you actually speak to that a little bit? Because I don't know if everyone in our audience will be aware, particularly those outside the specialist finance space.
The car finance world has had what I think they call hidden fees, not disclosed, not transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's accidentally or on purpose is another matter. But there was some case law, and they are now having to wind back the situation. Apparently, it all falls onto the lender rather than the brokers, even though you kind of think, well, the real beneficiaries are the brokers.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see. And I know I've been a member of the NACFB. They've created a new template for, okay, it's not for me because I don't do car finance and never have done and probably don't have any ambition to right now. For fuller disclosure, where you get the client to sign something before it actually happens. But you know what? To me, it just sounds quite similar to how it works in the regulated space. Everything's got to be documented. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing disclosed. I'm for full transparency, But what you've got to remember is, and this picks up on this Martin Stewart fellow, I'm not sure I know.
It's from London Money.
Okay. I wouldn't mind, but if a deal closes and you don't pay me because you haven't collated that element for me, how do I know my client's not going to pay me? Have I got time to chase them? I'm not trusting of anybody when it comes to money, because it's funny how it's stuck in the post. The chaps didn't work. But an arrangement fee, or the fee that us introducers get, is a cost to the client. It's not a cost to you.
No.
You are just a facilitator of the movement of that money. And if it's there in black and white, whatever colour print you use, and it says it's going from here, from there, and part of the arrangement fee is disclosed, I don't know why you need to do it a different way. I know there are a small number of banks, particularly banks, that don't do that. You have to take the fee off your client. Fine. I've done it once or twice, I think NatWest and Lloyds before. But otherwise, most of it's part of the arrangement fee. End of.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand why, from the broker's perspective, you don't want to be chasing a client for payment for a deal that is effectively paid out. Most developers, most developers, I often joke that many of them are degenerates at the best of times.
It's spent before it hits their bank account. It's gone.
Yeah, well, when we have developers who come to us for the first drawdown, and there's nothing on site, but they're claiming for 100 grand's worth of preliminaries and whatnot, and they're driving around in a new Range Rover.
Yeah, funny that.
Yeah, funny that. Yeah,
it's like bounce back loans for 50 grand. That's just enough to get yourself a Range Rover Vogue SE on the money, 49950, and they sold out. And then people say, well, actually, you've got to pay back that money.
Yeah.
The car's a depreciating asset. Well, why did you do that? It's meant to sustain your business. But have I answered your question? We talked about fees, how they work, why I think they should stay as they are.
Well, I think it's as much of anything as a discussion point, frankly. So we don't need we don't need to come to a conclusion on anything.
No, and I'm sure there's two camps on how it should be done, but it's got to be at the benefit of the client.
Yeah,
that's it. As long as that's first and foremost. I mean, how many deals come across where it's broker first, client and lender equals second, or should I say third?
We worked in the past with a broker, and I think the broker and the broker had a habit of bringing cash starved, relatively inexperienced developers to us, and they were structuring the senior, mezz if there was mezz, and equity. And because the clients weren't particularly experienced, sort of didn't really know what they're doing, the general outturn of the deal would be the broker would make loads of money, the lender would make less than the broker but be fine, would do all right, and then the client and the equity would lose most of their money, if not all of it, and the client would end up bankrupt. We certainly saw outcomes like that. In as things progressed with some of the deals that these brokers were doing. So yeah, we've definitely seen it. There's definitely elements of that out there. It's just how it is. If we just rewind back in terms of the history, how did you go from working for Henry Moser to then Bridge Development as you are now?
I got sacked.
You got sacked. Okay.
Simple as that. Not performing enough.
And then was that it? Was that it straight to becoming a broker, or
got my train fare home on a Thursday, and by Monday I decided to set up with a broker, and I just rang up a few of my old clients. And bear in mind, I hadn't actually lent money for a little while. I said, look, but they remembered
because you've been working in the workout.
Yeah, I'd worked in the workout at Davenham and the workout at Taut-a, and I came across people that I dealt with, and I mustn't have insulted them because they gave me opportunities.
Because they were back on their feet, they were back developing.
I mean, some of them were quite substantial. There was never really a big problem. It was certain circumstances that were problematic. But I remember one, Pat, he said to me, Phil, you looked after me when things were tough. You didn't beat me up. I said, so here's it, have a go. And so I had a couple of all you need is a couple of active clients. You don't need lots. And that's sustained my business for a while until I started marketing and getting out and networking and all the rest of it. And I kind of enjoy it because it's quite peculiar to move from selling one set of products, whatever your employee had, to this basket. You got to hear about them, but actually see them in writing going, blimey hell. All right, at Davenham, 85% loan to GDV was exceptional. I get that. That's like stretch that's almost like 100% of the capital stack, effectively.
It's equity light, isn't it? There's nothing light about it. In fact, it's full equity, isn't it?
But how much do you think it cost?
I actually don't know. Well, it must have been, I don't know, 15, 20%?
Actually, quite close. It started at 18 and went up to about 24.
How did the client make any money out of that? That's my question.
Well, when you put nothing in and you've got another scheme on the go here, that's making, you're taking all the profitability out of that one, and this one you're getting a bid. It could be enough.
Yeah, okay.
You're surprised. But things were selling. There was a lot more pre-sales, there's a lot more activity in the market.
I suppose it was a hot market. If the property prices are going up 15, 20% every year.
Well, do you not remember there was a period in time where you could do nothing and earn more money from your house uplift every year than
your salary.
In your salary. Yeah. So it was that sort of era, and everybody was bundling. Gazumping was common as muck. So it was a different environment. Oh yeah, we were backing the right people. We weren't taking on novices. There were people who could do the job. So yeah. 18 to 24% doesn't look too bad now. No. It's kind of almost like mezz money now.
Yeah. But for the entire capital stack, not for the usual sort of things like that.
You can't have it always, It was one of those where, as a salesperson, you had to put a lot in the hopper for some of it to come out. But you know what? You'd be surprised when people go, I've got to put nothing in. How good's that?
Yeah.
They almost forgot the math.
It's an option, isn't it? It's a free hit in a lot of ways for some people. So.
But when you're building a scheme and you build over a term, if you can sell something early, that starts to reduce your debt quantum. So suddenly the profitability starts to expand. And the circumstances then were very different to where they are now. Now people are, I've got a guy who's built a scheme. His first sale was 22, 3, 4 in 23, 8 this year. He's still got best part of 30 to sell. Poor situation. Otherwise I would have suspected back in that period of time, we would have probably got shot of the whole lot within 15 months, end of.
Yeah, it's bad timing, isn't it?
But, when you borrow money, you've got to pay it back. Where does it say, you don't?
No. Well, you'd be surprised the number of people that borrow from us and, forget about that part of their obligation, you know what I mean?
When they got past the numbers, they don't look at the cost, the time, and yes, you've got to pay it back, and if you don't, they'll be not interested.
Who would you say has been your most colourful character that's approached you to help you get them funding? And obviously don't have to name them, but who would you say is the sort of the strangest person strangest person or strangest situation you've been?
I might just have described one in that Hindu temple.
Yeah, I mean that definitely covers it.
Look, I've had people that come to me. I haven't sorted out anything because I remember there was one he'd done some porridge for, I don't know, drugs dealing on the street. It's when he introduced me to someone else who'd done drugs dealing, but I looked on Google, and Google's a great tool. 20 years he got, and I went, you're not a street drugs dealer, you're a kingpin. I went, even I don't think I can. You have to move on from that one.
You can do Hindu temples, but you can't walk on water.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't really know anyone. Most of them, everyone's got a personality, I get that.
Yeah.
And some are, quite dry. I've got a very dry sense of humour, and only certain people get it. Is there anyone colourful? No, and I couldn't name names, so that would.
We don't have to name names. We can certainly do it on a no names basis, but
yeah. When I used to lend money at Ruffler Bank, we would be willing to talk to people that had some colour.
Yeah.
And they did. We asked less questions. Ultimately, can you do the job? And we weren't lending high gearing. It was kind of 70-30 across the capital stack. And I should tell you, I used to do the QS work every month. I was the monitoring surveyor, the brick counter. How did I do it? I took a photo from the last visit and went, there's no more bricks.
Yeah.
You want 100 grand for that? It was.
I mean, speaking from personal experience, the number of times you get the monitoring surveyor's report, and the monitoring surveyor's valuing 150, 200 grand of extra work, and you look at the photos. The eye test is, you don't need to be a monitoring surveyor to know that you haven't done any work on site.
Sorry, Gov, it's the infrastructure underneath.
Yeah.
Bit of plastic tubing and a cut in the ground.
The one we've been hearing recently was we built the ring beam, right, and then we covered it over, and that's worth £250,000.
There's chances. In fact, you've just reminded me, one of my cousins' extended family, he borrowed money sponsored by my uncle, and he, in cahoots with a QS, he basically stole 250 grand before he got found out. And apparently the same two fellas had done it somewhere else. Now the question is, where were the lenders in all of this? Where was their own representative? Did they actually go and have a look at the site? What were they provided as a QS report? Because normally they come with photos. Oh, that's not our scheme. How did you not notice? I mean, it's staggering.
Well, is that the dodgiest thing that you'd ever seen or witnessed in your career?
Well, Taut-a was quite dodgy, what went on there.
But at an individual deal level?
I've had people chance it where you're doing a local deal, as in the scheme's near where they live. I'll drive past and I see in their house having an extension built. And I'm going, you want 50 grand and you've not laid a brick. Really what you're doing is paying someone to do because it's tax-free, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, wise guys. I mean, when I was dealing with these people in the coin-op business, cash being...
So these are the people you were lending to, back in the Ruffler days, was it? Yeah.
I saw all sorts of things, which I...
Come on then.
Well, it would be unfair to the community because I think things have improved. But, where there's cash, there's avoidance, or is it evasion? I'm not sure which one. Yeah.
We can be generous and call it avoidance, shall we?
Yeah. And I don't like that because whatever I was getting paid, whatever the tax man wanted, he got before I even saw my money. Now I run my own business and I get all of it. And I have to remember I've got to put something aside to the tax man and the VAT man and this. But I can trust myself not to spend it because it's not mine to spend. These guys, there was games to be played, and coin-op, sweet shops. Have we got more than one till? One they declare and one they don't. It's hey, look.
Where do you get your haircut?
Got this?
Well, just generally, where do you get your haircut?
My local.
And
do you
plastic? And you play by plastic?
By
okay.
Plastic. So
well, that's rare these days. Well, certainly where I live.
I probably pay a bit more than you.
What's wrong with my haircut?
No. My hairdresser. I don't work with the owner. I work with someone who rents a seat. So she needs to keep control because she's got others to look after in different parts of the country. So now
because I think I'm sure most of our audience, the male ones anyway, they'll be going to a barber, a Turkish barber.
No. I like.
And it's always cash. It's always cash in hand, isn't it?
I can't remember last time I had 20 quid on me. In fact, I remember I had to take 20 quid out as a contribution towards something, and they only wanted cash. But I had to go to a cash point and take it out, and I'm like, I feel vulnerable.
Have you ever remember? Yeah.
What do you do with 20?
Do you even remember your PIN? Because everything's tap and go these days, isn't it?
That's the way of the world, isn't it? Yeah. It's a control function, I'm sure.
Well,
do you pay your subbies 20% before you start them working, and you pay them cash, so there's no VAT, and you wonder why it disappears? I'd rather pay them. There's an audit trail. And look, each to their own.
Yeah, I mean, I guess increasingly the days of cash in hand are becoming less and less, and I'm sure that one of the government probably has seen one of the benefits of the pandemic is that people then wouldn't accept cash, and therefore receipts in a lot of the businesses, declared receipts had to go up as a consequence of that.
Yeah.
Because there's less temptation to take it under the table, shall we say?
I just do what I need to do. I like to sleep at night, knowing I haven't got a problem, lurking around the corner. Because one day someone might tap me and say, oh, "Mr. Mabb, can I have a look at your books?" Even pay insurance against my accountant making a mistake. Maybe that's a luxury that I can afford. We're not talking about a lot of money, but it's more a case of principle. I don't judge other people. When I was lending money to these people that perhaps didn't pay their tax and dues, I'm not judge and jury on their own financial circumstance. I was more interested in, if I lent you money, would I get it back? And that's the principle of lending, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think
you haven't got a business if you don't get it back.
I mean, I remember when we celebrated years ago, we got our first. We celebrated our first 100 million of redemptions, and I actually got a nice. I think I posted on LinkedIn, and I got a very nice comment back from Mark Posniak, whether it was on LinkedIn or whether he messaged me directly, and he said, "Look, it's always, it's one, it's very easy to lend it. It's a lot harder to get it back, and actually, we speak now 9 years in, Avamore's, every penny we've lent in principle we've recovered and recovered back. Obviously, we've had to write off the occasional bit of interest or default interest or what have you, or fees, but." That's something that we've got some schemes that are putting that to the test, but we think we'll probably be all right on those as well.
It's been a very, unlike the last crisis, it was literally boom bust and get on. This one has been, squeeze. It's like a boa constrictor, tighten, and all it's done is kick the can down the road. Yeah. But this year it's been a tough call, and I think there'll be some more next year. I mean, hopefully there'll be some light at the end of the tunnel. Interest rates. Us Brits, we like to find an excuse not to do something.
Not to do something, yeah.
And I'm going, how many more excuses are there? I think there's a tsunami coming from America, the Trump effect. How will that affect us and the rest of Europe, and how do we behave? But builders need to build, all that usual stuff. Labour want us to build 1.5 million houses. I'm going, I'm not sure there's 1.5 million people, enough resource to build the 1.5 million, even if we said get on with it.
Well, the planning system, I think we're starting to see with the government, they're very good at the chat, but they aren't very good at backing up with policies that make any sense. If you want to encourage people to build, you probably don't want to take a source of buyers out of the market as well. If you put a 5% surcharge on stamp duty for effectively buy-to-let investors. Yep. You want the buy-to-let investor, the private amateur buy-to-let investor is gone. It's dead. There's absolutely no reason why they'd be active in the market. But ultimately, if you're building flats or houses or whatever, whether you're a big PLC or you're a smaller developer, if you've seen one of your potential buyers has been removed from the market, are you going to have as much confidence to go and start building? You're not. No. You're just not.
No, there's an undercurrent that's really stopping things moving. There's lots of people that would like to have the confidence to do things, but we're still not there yet. Yeah. Although I think, right now, I'm optimistic, more optimistic than I have been for probably the last 18 months. 2025's got to be the year to start that upward trajectory. However slow, slightly gradient.
I'd love for you to be right. I just think that the government's budget, the government's policies, I think their priorities are all backwards. The approach to tax. One of the, if you look at the market's reactions to the budget, specifically swap markets, everything that they're pointing to is that what the government's putting in place, the amount of spend, the tax rises, it's all going to be very inflationary. If you put all that money on the additional NICs on employers, that has two effects. If you're the supermarkets are already saying, look, this is going to add quite a few percentage points onto effectively food price inflation. It's the same for hospitality companies as well. On the flip side, you're going to see increasing numbers of redundancies. You've got like BT announcing redundancies. Yeah. Interest rates aren't going to go down as fast. So that optimism that I think we had in the summer, at the start of the summer, when that first rate cut came in, I think everyone sort of started to feel like, oh, okay, it's coming now. It's starting to happen. I mean, even only 2 months ago, you had Goldman Sachs going, oh, interest rates are going to go down to 2.75, and we had that nice inflation print at 1.7% that came in, a big undershoot. And so everyone thought, right, okay, here we go. But then
can Labour change their policy? The writing's on the wall. They're seeing they made it wrong. A bit like when Lizzie and Quizzy destroyed the markets in 2022,
2 years
October.
ago,
You
know. My personal view is the thing that concerns me is that I had optimism that Rachel Reeves was a pragmatist, and that she'd make sensible decisions. And the one thing that tells me that they're ideological and not pragmatic is the VAT on school fees, because it won't raise any money. In fact, it's going to do possibly the opposite.
Yeah.
It's going to be a net negative. But what they want to do is they just want to destroy the independent school system, and it's just ideological. And I think that's where their policy brief is. It's unfortunately it's student politics at heart. And so, like I said, I'd love to be optimistic. I'd love to share your optimism about 2025. That there was that saying, wasn't there, at the end of last year?
All right, let's put it a slightly different way. So still make it positive. It's like a dead cat.
Even a dead cat bounces.
Yeah. Have we bottomed out? Is the worst over?
I think what we're going to do is we're just going to continue to bumble along the bottom. You're in a good position in the sense that it's just you. I was going to ask you, why you chosen to be a sole trader and not try and grow a team and try and expand your remit, but and maybe you can speak to that. But I think that the conversations I've been having, we're interviewing at C-suite level, and I've been talking to quite a lot of experienced people during this interview process, and there seems to be a consistent theme about there are concerns that a lot of organisations are going to fall down in the next year and a half because of lower volumes, and also basically paying the price for some poor decision making. Whether that's
we're talking about lenders, because
lenders
seems to be
I think there's lenders
more.
I think there's and it's interesting, isn't it? But it's lenders and I think also brokers. I mean, you can't go to the FP show like we did on Friday. There seems to be like the chat seems to be the market is going to continue. The bridging market's going to continue to grow. How? Where is this growth going to come from? I don't understand how you can justify it. I don't believe the numbers that a lot of our peers are reporting.
Neither do I. If you have a quiet full conversation with anybody, the reality is, my business has been weak, but then I've also been lazy on the marketing stuff. There is less to go around, and yet there's still to be more lenders. I got a call today from a broker who's running a private fund. I laughed and said, "What's your USP?" I said, "I know of you, but that's it. That's about it. I'd rather work with people who are established." I've heard good and bad things. Everyone has a bad experience from time to time. So even the best lenders, if you like, make a mistake from time to time. The reality is, are they stayers? And they're the people that if I'm going to introduce that client over there to someone like yourself, it's because I know you, I trust you, I've seen you deliver, etc., etc. All the other ones, it's like if needs must. If you said no and all the goodies said no, then there's an opportunity for everybody else. But I have seen lenders disappear. Pop on their website, it's gone. They don't announce it. Nobody announces bad news.
Wait, I mean, if you cast your mind back, we started in 2015, right? Who was the big player? Who was making all the noise in 2015? Amicus, right?
Ah, yes.
Yeah. See.
Yeah.
And if you'd said to me in 2015, Amicus wouldn't see out the end of the decade, I'd have said no way. Every year that pretty much there's a casualty. Someone drops out of the market and disappears.
This. It doesn't take much. A small deal where you lose your shirt, whether it's a fraud or something, that can wipe out your profitability. That can kill you.
I mean, we were victims of fraud. Fortunately, we had insurance from the guys at Westcore, was Title Solve, and they paid out very nicely. But not everyone.
No.
Not everyone will have followed the. We know of that from speaking to Westcor, that not everyone that they insure keeps a file that's good enough that means that they can actually honour the insurance commitment every time.
Yeah, you've got to read the small print because they don't want to pay out necessarily. They've got to protect their own situation. So yeah, it's a tough one, but there's more coming in. Is the volume there? Probably not. But and
then if you're dealing with back book issues, how do you reconcile lower volumes and back book issues? How do you keep that going? And on the broker side, you know, if you've got a big brokerage and you've got dozens of people, and
they're all self-employed.
But then how do they stay self-employed if they're not doing many deals?
I think once upon a time I heard there was like 16,000 brokers in the sector. All right, and I might be going back to the last crisis, maybe, and that figure I heard was down to 9. I don't know how many of us there are. You know, I've got faith. I've got enough clients just to sustain myself. You know, you get a nice chunky deal every now and again, but there's the bread and butter stuff. And right now, I need clients that have to trade because there's a set of circumstances. There's a driver. They've run out of time with you. You've said, move on. That's an opportunity. But like, you know, last year, certainly in the dev finance space, and some of my clients, they're mature, they're wealthy enough. They don't need to trade. So they'd rather not do a deal because they're thinking costs are going up, sales volumes and figures are going down. We can sit and wait. And that's an awkward one. And I wouldn't want to be a young broker right now because, you know, I'm an old lag. I've got contacts going back 24 years and I bumped into one in March this year and I'm working on something now, having not done anything with him since 2004. It's tough. And I don't know what the solution is. And you've got to be a chameleon or chameleonic in your outlook. And broking is not broking. You can come in and go back out to. So maybe you can do something else. I've always stuck to bridging and development, but maybe I should have been doing some buy to let and some regulated mortgages, just because then you got the balance. It's a bit like an estate agent. When the sales are strong, they don't worry about the lettings. When lettings are strong, they don't worry about the sales. But actually, you want to keep both of them going. Like a contractor, you do your own business and you go and work for someone else. So you've got to think out the box.
I mean, if you were to give one piece of advice to a relatively new broker to the sector, what would
another job? The truth hurts, but it is the truth.
Well, that's going on Instagram.
Well, I mean, look, it's about plausibility. I think people forget. When you're buying a car, it might be 15, 20, 50, 100 grand, sometimes more. When you're buying property, it doesn't start there. It starts up here. So you're investing not only hard cash and your technical skills, you're also betting against the vagaries of the market. If you're a young broker, there's not a lot of that around. So what are you actually bringing to the table? You know, I've got grey hair and matter, and I probably forgot more than I remember. And frankly, I'm only as good as what I did in the last 5 or 10 years, what I did 20 years ago. The world moves on. So hedge your bets. It's like you're going to be an actor. You're going to be out of a job more often than you're not. So you're going to have skills. So think about something else, because broking can come in and go out to. You know, you might have to let go of people, and they're relying on a salary and their payroll. Unfortunately, I've mentored a couple of people. One of my clients, his son was out of CAS. I gave him a year. One of my mates, I needed some support, but he was never going to work for me full time. It was a starter. He's now doing his accountancy at Deloitte's. I don't want that responsibility anymore. You know, I manage people, albeit I was an employee of a bigger firm. I just keep myself to myself, get under the radar. I enjoy what I do with the people I do, and I'll happily educate people in some shape or form, but I don't have to employ them. But what I do is work with other people in the sector. So I don't do regulated and singular buy-to-let. I work with a well-known firm that makes me look good because they do a good job with the clients. So I'm doing it all the time. People from the trade and asset finance world, they don't really do the regulated, the property piece, so they come to me. I mean, look, you know, asset-based lending, It really should be asset-based lending, excluding property. It's like the stock market, Europe ex UK. That gives me opportunity. So, but I give and reciprocate. So, whilst we're not in each other's pockets, like if I was working as for a packager, I'm much more nimble. I can work from home. I've got a couple of offices, IOD, for example, and I kind of like it. It's there's no exit for me, but I just I do what I want when I want, and people buy into me. That works for me. The minute you start employing people, you do dilute the situation. I'm sure you know the brand Avamore. Would I like to run a big package and have lots of people? And sometimes I do, but in the same way as sometimes I think I should go back to lending. Every now and again someone will ring me up and say, "Phil, do you fancy going lending?" And I'm going,
I don't believe you'd want to go and run a packager. Knowing you as I have done for 9+ years.
It's hard work though, being a sole trader, because I'm all things to all people all the time, and I know there's other people like me who are very loud on LinkedIn, making this noise. It's hard work. It's hard work. It is. If I had other people to work with or work under me, you can delegate certain elements of it. Social media, I can just about go. I let people take photos and put it on the LinkedIn post. For me, that's good enough.
Oh, speaking of which, we need to get some live photos of
you want a headshot,
this chat. Yeah, we get some live photos of us chatting, so we can put it on, so we can put it on your LinkedIn.
Excellent.
What would be your advice to your younger self? When you had to retake your O levels, if you were to give yourself some self-talk. Knowing what you do now, what would be your advice to your younger self?
I actually think about that from time to time, and I should have applied myself and think beyond here, because when I started to do something I enjoyed doing, I was much more engrossed in it. It was look under the bonnet, get involved. It is all in the detail. You can't sell a product unless you're invested in it and you really enjoy it. And those people who enjoy it are not doing a job. It's a vocation. And the amount of people I meet, particularly the more youthful people, or younger than me, that's not difficult, right? It's almost like it's a job. It's not. Think of it as your own business. So all your employees, they're either Zahir or Michael when they go out. I don't know if the ladies would agree with that. Michelle.
Michaela.
Michaela, yeah. And enjoying it. And, I was the FP show. I was walking from one stand to another, and a lot of people are very elevated. They were enjoying it, and you could see they were invested in their product. They believed in it. I can't sell something I don't agree with. I don't enjoy. But other people, it was like, "Oh, sorry, I've come to your stand." It's like they should have had a big cross sign, do not approach. And honestly, there was one of them.
So there's arms folded
looking somewhere else, hiding behind the mobile as people do. Again, you're here for a day to present your business, and that business earns you a salary, maybe even bonuses. You should be out pushing it. You've got a good group of people. Sophie's my conduit. Love her to pieces. Personality, and she knows her onions.
She does.
And that's a very good. We could have Sophie multiplied in every lender. It would be a real pleasure in their industry. Some people, they hide from you, going, "Do you not want my business?" You might get it, you might not, but unless you've got to be in it to win it. So there's my takeaway. Enjoy what you do. Find a reason to like it, and if you don't, find something else to do, because life is quite short. I still remember being 25, and I'm going, that was more than 25 years ago. But it's a good place.
Well, I think that's a really good place to end today's conversation. So, Phil, just wanted to thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate you coming up to Hoxton to record here with us. And obviously, people are going to want to reach out to you if they're not already connected with you or aren't following you on
bring deals.
LinkedIn. What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest, and on LinkedIn is contact number and email address. Phil Mabb on LinkedIn, or phil@bridgedevelopment.co.uk. There's an easy two. I can't give them my number out. If I give them, they'll all ring at the same time, and I'll end up not fielding the calls.
It'll end up on
orderly queue, please.
Yeah, but you don't want your phone number scribbled on some toilet wall in Shoreditch, do you? So.
Oh, and by the way, I start work at 6 o'clock, so don't be shy. Don't wait till 9 o'clock, because that's really bad when people ring you. I spent a minute in a dealing room trying to hold two phones, the old Bakelite. You can't do that with a mobile.
No, no, you can't. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks again for coming in. Also want to give a shout out and thanks to our today's sponsor, J3, who alongside the core sponsor, Avamore Capital, which obviously the business that myself and Zaher co-founded. Anyway, we want to give our thanks to J3 and run by Jack, as you said, your fellow Palace fan.
Eagles.
Final thing, Phil, prediction for Palace this season. How do you think? What position do you think you're finishing?
17th.
17th.
Just enough to stay up.
Just enough to stay up. Okay. Well, on that bombshell, thanks, Phil. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
And thanks to our audience. Thank you very much for seeing this one through. And we'll talk to you again on the next one.